It's like you've been drinking beer all day and someone comes over and brings you a nice little pina colada and you're like, oh yeah, I could touch up with that. That's kind of what.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, and you enjoy that pina colada as you drink it, but then you're like, I'm probably going to go back to beer.
Hello and welcome to the Infinity Bros Podcast, the only podcast that's perfectly balanced, as all things should be. My name is Isaac Edlin. I am your host tonight, and with me I have a very special guest. It is Aaron Davies from the Fandom Portals Podcast. How are you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing really well, Isaac. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I love the Infinity Bros. Your Instagram is slapping.
Thank you. And that is in thanks to Infinity Bro Robbie, who is doing a ton of Magic the Gathering content. But if you're interested in following his Magic stuff, he just recently started a new page called Robert Redbeard MTG. So he's going to be moving most of his Magic content to that. But in the meantime, I'm trying to pick up the slack on our main socials. So I'm trying to shift it from like straight hardline MTG to like back to what we do on the podcast, like
you're
movies,
trying to change the
television,
algorithm.
you know, it's going to be tough, but we're going to try to do it. So
Yep. No, I've been seeing your recent stuff too. I like your movie ones that you're doing where you're asking people what their favorite characters are and all their favorite or guess the movie line. That's been good ones that I've seen coming out too. Yeah, that's been great.
Guess the movie's kind of my new series because it's an easy one that I can just be like, all right, what's a random line that I have stuck in my head from a movie way back, you know, that I memorized.
Yep.
And yesterday I did one on Napoleon Dynamite because my parents gave me these USA like Stars and Stripes pants that are worn by Rex in that scene. And oh my gosh, I recently watched that again, probably, I don't know, last year sometime, and holy crap, that movie just...
It was a sleeper. Hey, it's so funny.
Yeah. Like when I was in high school, that movie was like the rage. Everybody was, this is the best movie ever. Everybody was doing the Pedro
vote for Pedro
dance vote for Pedro dance that John Hader does in that scene, like for talent shows and stuff like that. It was a time. And then going back and watching it and be like, man, I can't believe there was such a rage phenomenon based on this movie, because cinematically it's like, I think, I don't remember the exact number, but that movie was produced for like, I don't know, $20,000 to $40,000 or something like that. Yeah, like nothing. It was just a bunch of college guys doing like a project basically. And the comedy still is peak. It hits, but like cinematically you definitely could tell like, oh yeah, this is just a bunch of guys in their backyard doing all this stuff. But it's a blast to go back and watch. So
I definitely agree. I think I haven't been able to eat ham since without saying, Tina, have some ham, you fat lard.
You fat lard. Oh my gosh. Yep. Yeah. Every time I'm holding any change in my hand, my immediate thought is, it's like $6 an hour. It's brings back some great memories from watching that and another like niche one that I'm gonna have to do a video on soon is Nacho Libre. Jack Black plays a luchador, and Nacho. That's one that my family and I watched. I think we watched it like weekly. Like we loved that movie, and I hear other people talking about it now, and they're like, "Yeah, that was a really weird movie. Like it's kind of bad." And I'm like, "You kidding me? That movie was amazing. I loved that movie." Yeah. Just one of those niche childhood movies that I will always love. And that's the kind of stuff that you talk about on the Fandom Portals too, right?
That's exactly it. Yeah, Fandom Portals, we take a movie. It was a solo project, but I've recently gotten a co-host. His name is Adam. He's a very good friend of mine. Yeah, he agreed to jump on. And yeah, we watch a movie and we sort of talk about it in terms of things that we can learn from it. So whether there's any awesome production technique stuff or whether there's some awesome behind the scenes stuff, that's sort of what we talk about. And then afterwards we go into like character deep dives and we talk about the different things that we can learn from what the characters have experienced. So it's almost like a little bit of film and TV mixed with a little like health and well-being, I guess you can say, just that mush together of those sorts of things. Because I found that the reason I love movies so much is because it's that communal experience of enjoying them with other people. But then, you know, as we talked about just then, sometimes movies can remind you of a time in the past, and they can really be quite a personal sort of thing as well. So we kind of wanted to tap into that at Fandom Portals as well. So like the portal is stepping through the portal of your past self, or stepping through the portal of your future self through the movies that you're looking at right now. So yeah, it's a good little thing. So, and it lets me watch movies because I was really stuck in a niche of watching the same type of movie all the time. So taking our community's insights and suggestions and things like that, and just running with some of those, I've got to see some really interesting movies that I wouldn't have watched previously.
That's true. I have enjoyed a bunch of your guys' episodes, but most recently I remember listening to the Venom 3 review that you guys did, and because I'm a big Spider-Man guy, I obviously had to watch Venom: The Last Dance, and I thought you guys absolutely nailed it on that episode. Like everything you guys said was just like, oh man, this is exactly what I was thinking when I was watching the movie. So it was a nice little like reflection or confirmation, I guess, of my thoughts on the movie. And man, I do love Spider-Man, but that whole Sony universe thing is just disheartening as a Spider-Man fan. And while Venom was able to carve out kind of its own little niche that was still enjoyable, Venom 3 certainly went out with a whimper, and I was a little bit bummed of that. I'll definitely put a link in the show notes for the Fandom Portals podcast, and we're also going to get to know Aaron a little bit here in our segment called the Infinity Gauntlet.
Are you a heel or a baby face? If you could make any flavor Cheez-It, what would it be? Is it pronounced Grogu or Groku? If Keanu Reeves isn't in the movie, can it be star-studded? It's time for the Infinity Gauntlet, here on the Infinity Bros podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So, Aaron, I actually did not prepare you for this intentionally because it's kind of a surprise thing to get to know our guests a little bit better. Each of the Infinity Bros fires a question at you, and you answer to the best of the ability, and we'll see if you make it through the Infinity Gauntlet. So are you ready for this?
I love a challenge. Let's go.
Awesome.
I'll be as honest as possible.
Yeah, please do. The first one is from me. So we're talking about Invincible later in this episode. If you were forced to be, or live, I should say, in the Invincible universe, the DC universe, or the Marvel universe, which one would you pick and why?
I would 100% pick the Marvel universe because it is colorful and bright, and the heroes there varying from, various different sides of the spectrum, from happy all the way to angry and sad and frustrated. But I feel like in the DC universe, they're really on that other end of the spectrum where it's dark and gloomy and tragic. And then in Invincible, any city I lived in would absolutely get destroyed and flattened. So
just get trashed. Yeah. Absolutely just demolished.
So I think the safest bet would definitely be the Marvel universe for me. So I'll lock that one in, Isaac.
Right. I think that's definitely a safe choice. I mean, you run the risk of being in any superhero universe of having that stuff happen. Maybe insurance agent is not filing your claim on your car that got thrown by the Hulk or something like that. But it does seem slightly more safer than, Invincible just leveling cities with all of his fights. So I think it's a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, and I also would not want to live anywhere near any kind of Viltrumite ever.
It's true.
Because
they the nail on the head there. Mm-hmm. All right. So this one's from Infinity Bro Robbie. What is your favorite niche fandom that no one would expect you to have a hand in?
Oh, I would say, I don't know if it's really niche, and I know that does have a bit of a calling and a following, but I really, really, really love movie soundtracks. To the point where people I listen to them. My Spotify Wrapped always includes some movie cinematic scores. It's the instruments, it's the build. I get this thing when I watch them where it's just like, I don't know if it's like a dopamine just dump inside my body, but I just immediately get goosebumps and feel all tingly when I watch it. It's like music. That's why I believe in bards from D&D, I guess, as music being magic, because it affects people like that. And so I guess that would be the fandom and the space that I've kind of put myself into, and that I don't really share that often, but also I don't really find that people vibe with that as much as I do. Like I'll play it in my car to the point where I'll just be vibing along to, say, the Jurassic Park theme, and I'll look over to the person next to me and I'll just have to turn it down because I know that they can hear it outside of my car.
Like, is he watching a movie in there? Or
yeah.
what?
No, I'll just switch it to Kendrick
you're
Lamar or
with
something.
the Jurassic Park one. That's one of my favorite soundtracks of all time.
Yeah.
I love Jurassic Park. Or basically anything John Williams does, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it is just musical genius.
Yeah, and I love it for moods. Like if I'm running late for work, I'll whack on some Hans Zimmer or something like that, and just the timpanis just like get you going. Obviously, driving safely, of course. Yeah,
of course, obviously. All right, I love that one. That's a great answer. All right, next one is okay. So, full disclaimer: I was on an episode of your podcast where we talked about Nicolas Cage, and apparently, some of my co-hosts came to believe that you are also a giant Nicolas Cage fan because both of these next Nicolas Cage questions came from them. Mm-hmm. So there you go. Just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up. But Max says, which Nicolas Cage character sums up your personality?
Oh man. The good-hearted nature, I guess, or the willingness to try and do your best in a bad situation comes from Nicolas Cage's character in Raising Arizona. My curiosity could come from Ben Gates, from National Treasure. I'd like to say that my leadership ability, or if I have any, would come from Nicolas Cage in Gone in 60 Seconds. So I would like to cherry pick from all of my favorite Nicolas Cage roles.
A few of them.
Yeah, that really sort of sum me up. So
those are great answers, and I was kind of not knowing how you were going to be able to answer that in a great period of time. So like that, I'm very impressed that you were able to pick those up pretty much right away. Nice work, dude. That's great. If I got sprung that question, even as a Nicolas Cage fan, I probably would have a hard time trying to come up with what my personality was like. So hey, kudos to you, man.
Appreciate it.
All right, last question here. This is from Infinity Bro Jarrett. He says, you're in a face-off situation with Diddy. How do you clear your name?
Oh, man.
So Diddy obviously is in jail right now. You in Diddy's body in jail. He is you, hopefully far away from your family and doing Diddy things. But how do you clear your name? You're in jail. What do you do?
I would try. I'm an honest guy, so I would probably try to tell people the truth. I'd be like, look, I'm not Diddy. And then at the very least, if I was convincing enough, that would put me down as being like insane, and I could claim that in my trial. So
that's true.
That's how I'd do it. I'd go down that little loophole / rabbit hole area.
I don't think you'd have to worry that much because I feel like Diddy being on the outside in somebody else's body would be so worried that the person in his own body would out him, that he would be trying to do everything he could to get you out of jail. So
I could just sit and chill for a little while, hopefully just lay low.
Out.
Yep. That would be the best way.
And hopefully like security max prison so nobody else knows you're there.
Yep. Keep me in my own little or I'd do something that puts me in isolation. That's the smart thing to do, isn't it? Yep. Start one of those.
There you go. So that was the final question of the Infinity Gauntlet. So,
did I pass?
You passed. Congratulations! I've never had to kick anybody off of the podcast yet. So, congratulations! You did it. You passed the Infinity Gauntlet.
Good stuff. I love it.
Great.
Thanks
work.
for your questions, Infinity Bros. Love that.
That was fun. That was a good time. All right, so we're going to dive into a few things later in this episode, but I wanted to take a break to say that we have a special rating system on the Infinity Bros podcast.
Here on the Infinity Bros podcast, everything is ranked from a 0 to 6 point scale. 0 meaning horrible and 6 meaning absolutely excellent. If all of the Infinity Bros rank something a 6, it gets an Infinity Step.
And so if you hear us rate things by a number, that is how we do things. And we are also going to be spoiling Invincible. I'll give a spoiler warning later because we'll probably give just some opening thoughts before we give a spoiler warning. But right now, we are going to dive into some nerd news.
Hey, Zane, I was looking into getting into this Gunpla thing. There's one called the Unicorn Banshee. What the heck is that all about? Actually, Jarrett, what you're thinking of is RX-0 Unicorn Gundam 2 Banshee, which is from the Mobile Suit Gundam. Actually, you know what? It's time for nerd news.
All right, so we've got a few things kind of from both of our areas of expertise. If you go back to the Patreon version of this episode, you can hear a little bit more talk on a few other touches of nerd news, but we've got a few things to talk about on our main episode as well. But you can join our Patreon for as little as $2 a month to get exclusive access to unedited episodes of the Infinity Bros podcast. So first thing I want to talk about in nerd news is we have a casting decision from Spider-Man 4. Sadie Sink joins Tom Holland in Spider-Man 4, according to a Deadline article confirmed by many leakers. In the Deadline article, I found this fascinating. Sadie Sink is a great actress. I love her from Stranger Things, one of my favorite characters in that show. But the article that is referenced, the writer of it speculates that she could be playing Jean Grey in Spider-Man 4, which to me does not make any sense. I don't really understand how introducing a high-level mutant like that in a Spider-Man movie is really going to fit into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But what did you think when you first heard this news, and who did you think she was going to play?
I was pretty excited because I know, like, Sadie Sink is obviously a very talented actress. Then hearing, obviously, the Jean Grey announcement, I thought she was going to be playing Jean Grey in an X-Men movie or something like that, which I'd be very happy about too. But hearing that she's in a Spider-Man movie, I probably would prefer her to be playing like a variant version of Mary Jane. That would be my pick. And I'd think that would be good because I feel like her dynamic with Tom Holland would be very unique and also confusing for the character, you could say. I feel like it would be really awesome to see Sadie come in as the confident, trying to get Tom Holland's Spider-Man back out into a happy place after he's lost so much from the John Watt trilogy. And I think that that sort of side of Mary Jane, I mean, Zendaya played the sassy, quippy sort of side of Mary Jane that we see, but that encouraging but also ultimately positive side of Mary Jane that you see, I think like she could bring that out, like the fun sort of aspect of Tom Holland. Like I want to see some snowball fights and some just down to earth, like street level connection from these two, and then obviously there'll be the big confusing point when Zendaya's Mary Jane or Michelle Jones regains her memories, and then what happens there, you know? So that's what I'd like to see. Whether it does or doesn't, we'll see what they do. But yeah, Jean Grey, I wouldn't be opposed if she appears in a later X-Men movie. That'd be good. But I agree with you. I think that in a Spider-Man flick, she's just too much of a big character on her own to be second billing, I guess, to Spider-Man.
And we've heard a lot of rumors about Spider-Man 4 because obviously Spider-Man 3 ends and everybody has forgotten who he is. He's kind of starting out from scratch on his own. It seems like it would be a perfect segue into becoming the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man for a straight level movie. But we've been hearing a ton of rumors about how Spider-Man 4 is potentially going to be like cosmic, like it's kind of going to be intertwined with Avengers Doomsday and potentially Secret Wars. Initially, this movie was set to come out in between Doomsday and Secret Wars, but I think we've been hearing a lot of rumors about them pushing back Doomsday because I don't even think they're filming that yet, and it was slated to come out next year already. So probably not going to happen. But Spider-Man 4 now is making these castings. I believe I heard a report that Tom Holland is shooting for Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey movie right now. And right after that, he will be filming Spider-Man 4. So just along the timeline of everything, it potentially could be a movie that we see a little bit more multiversal, cosmic type aspects of it. And in that sense, a multiversal Mary Jane does make sense. In the cosmic side of things, I guess you could interject Jean Grey because of, the Phoenix and
her Phoenix
all that
persona.
stuff going on. But yeah, it doesn't really add up to me in a Spider-Man movie. I have heard other fan castings online that she may be playing Felicia Hardy or the Black Cat. Obviously, kind of her defining characteristic is her red hair, that she's a redhead. So, I mean, that's first thought is that she's multiversal Mary Jane, or I have also heard people say that she could be playing Firestar, which is a smaller character from Amazing Spider-Man and his Super Friends, I believe is the TV show.
And Iceman was the third part of that sandwich.
Yep. Right, exactly.
I remember that.
So, that would be definitely a stretch casting for me. I feel like, would it be cool? Yeah, it could be cool. I'd be okay with that. Felicia Hardy would be really cool though too. I would love to see a Black Cat. And I think, honestly, she has the acting chops to probably pull off whatever they cast her for. So we'll just have to wait and see. But I am very excited about this either way, regardless. I think the multiversal Mary Jane aspect, I think she'd nail a Mary Jane, but I do think it would add a layer of confusion from just like all of the other casual Marvel watchers that, may not be included in on all the news and all the things that are coming with Doomsday and Secret Wars and all that stuff. So I think, I don't know if that would get a little too convoluted for a mainline MCU story. I mean, you can do anything as long as you have a good story. So they could potentially pull it off, but I think I'm inclined to believe that she's casted for a character that we have not seen yet in
I'd be okay with that too. Yeah. I mean, John Watts' Spider-Man trilogy, the Home trilogy, I think it works so well because there is some, like, obviously cosmic elements and some very sciencey sort of elements in it. But at the heart of it, it's basically about a boy growing up. Like, he goes through high school and he finds his place from becoming a really enthusiastic Spider-Man that really wants to become an Avenger to then just wanting to be a kid, and then finally, obviously, realizing the consequences of his actions and the burden of responsibility that he holds as being Spider-Man. So then coming from that trilogy, I think it would be good to sort of ground him a little bit in this new space. Because as we talked about before in the Patreon prior, Daredevil street level stuff is going great guns right now. And I think that's kind of what Marvel fans are wanting to eat up. And with a spread of things coming out like Fantastic Four and your two Avengers movie that are definitely going to be high-level cosmic, I think the Spider-Man street level would be a good contrast to that. So I hope they go in that direction, and Sadie Sink does play somebody completely new, maybe like someone that went to the high school with Peter and just remembers him from that. So it's like that like humanistic, this is your Peter Parker side sort of connection there. But yeah, if it's a Mary Jane as well, or a cosmic element like that, I'd be happy to have her in the MCU as Mary Jane. But I think, Spider-Man story, probably not the place to do it.
Speaking of Daredevil, the next piece of nerd news we have is that John Bernthal and Marvel have confirmed that he is co-writing a special presentation for The Punisher. We obviously see John Bernthal's Punisher show up in Daredevil, the original Netflix series, and he gets his own series, which both are fantastic. And John Bernthal, I mean, dude is a great casting for Punisher. He absolutely nailed it in those series, and I'm excited to see him back for Daredevil Born Again. We have confirmation that he's going to be in this season, so I'm very excited to see what happens next. But what do you think about John Bernthal getting a special presentation? I'm assuming special presentation means it's a Disney Plus original, so it's only going to be aired on Disney Plus. What do you think about that?
I am extremely happy, because if you're going to put a special presentation of anything about anyone, it should be something with John Bernthal in it, because what an actor. He's a superstar. He's got absolute range. I've watched him in The Bear, and he plays a minimal part in that and a guest star in that, but every single episode he is in is a memorable one to me. And he can fire off emotional scenes just absolutely perfectly, which is awesome for the Punisher, because obviously it can be a hyper-violent blood fest, absolutely. But if you're playing it as a character like John Bernthal does, he's also got that heart, he's got that emotionality, and he's also able to flick between mentalities, I guess you could say. So he's like that logical tactician as the Punisher, but he's also that unhinged lunatic, which is exactly what Frank Castle needs to be. Yeah. He's literally the perfect casting for the Punisher, and I think like the special presentation. I've also heard that the special presentations are almost a little bit more art house, like the Werewolf by Night, I think it was from Marvel, which I didn't watch, but I heard was a little bit of a different sort of take and streak. So even if it's a little bit more like that, I feel like John Bernthal can hold it through. He's probably one of my favorite Marvel castings, honestly. Like, I know for the Punisher, it was either, for me, in my headcanon, it was either John Bernthal or Frank Grillo, who ended up playing Crossbones. Yeah, just perfect. I'm happy with hearing all of that because I would watch John Bernthal on a screen forever. And if you want a John Bernthal movie that's really awesome, watch him in Fury, also starring Brad Pitt. Great cinema.
Yeah, he is fantastic. When he's in The Bear, he steals every scene that he's in. Like, he just absolutely lights it up in any scene that he's in. It's a fantastic show. Special presentation. So there's 2 of them right now. It is, like you said, the Werewolf by Night, and then the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special is the other special presentation. Yeah, fantastic. Love both of those. Werewolf by Night was definitely a swing. It was something way different. Michael Giacchino, who obviously is known for his musical composition, was able to direct that, and he did a incredible job. It's like straight out of the 40s monster movie, honestly. Like, it's something very different.
Yeah.
And if that's any indication of what we could get from John Bernthal in a special presentation for the Punisher, I'm 100% in. Let him pick a outside the box director and do something crazy with it.
Yeah,
why not?
I definitely agree, and probably I want to see some unique sort of cinematography in the movie as well. Just like something to really flex John Bernthal in that role, because I think that he's like, everyone's really excited about him being in the new Daredevil series too. So he's a hinging character that Marvel can just like really pin their suits on, which is good.
All right, last piece of nerd news that we're going to talk about is the Lilo and Stitch live action trailer just dropped this week. It's in theaters May 23rd this year. It's coming up quick. And this is really, we kind of have gotten a little bits of teasers here and there.
Oh, they've been awesome.
Yeah, and they've been awesome. This is the first full trailer that we've gotten for it. What were your thoughts coming into this? What are your thoughts on like maybe the original movie, and then with the whole trend of like remakes, live action remakes, what were your thoughts coming into this one, and are you excited for this movie?
Okay, so I think I'll start with the live action trend, because I think like a lot of online people, I'm in the camp of like, why do we need this sort of thing? Because I'm very nostalgic about the old Disney hand-drawn animation. I think they're a work of art, not only like visually, but also just growing up as a kid watching those things. They're perfectly suited for like childhood viewing. I definitely think this pays on the 30-somethings who grew up feeling like that, and they're definitely going to see these movies because of that reason. That being said, I know that a lot of people complain because they don't want a shot-for-shot remake of the originals, but then you think about how they tried to do something different with Mufasa, where it's an original story using characters that you're familiar with, and it just didn't really land. So it's almost like the fans are never really happy with what they're getting in terms of the live-action Disney remakes. Now, in saying all of that, I'm absolutely excited for this movie. I think it's going to be bloody awesome. Looking at the Lilo and Stitch trailer, it does look like there are some very similar scenes to the original animated, but I think in the trailer you kind of do have to do that, because that would be the biggest complaint, wouldn't it, if you're looking at the movie and it's completely different to a Lilo and Stitch story that you know. I loved seeing Stitch through all of the different. I even got them here in Australia, like the commercials that Stitch has been coming through. Like he ran amok on the Super Bowl, and I think that was a really great insertion. And I really hope that continues past the release of Lilo and Stitch, because I just think that's a really great piece of Disney. Just
hilarious.
Yeah, just running through and wrecking the real world. One thing I loved about the original movie was the tie-ins to Elvis and the authentic portrayal of Hawaii, which it looks like they're going to do in this one, because there is definitely the Elvis music playing through the trailer. The Devil in Disguise, perfectly suited for obviously Stitch. The one thing I was really blown away with by the trailer was the actress who plays Lilo. It's Maya Kealoha. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but she sounds brilliant. Like, she sounds absolutely like the Lilo from the original Disney movie. Obviously, having Chris Sanders back to voice Stitch is a perfect choice. One thing that I would hold a little question mark over for me is Jumba and Pleakley, Jumba being played by Zach Galifianakis. It looks like in the trailer, all I kind of saw or got from them was that they're playing, like, they've obviously got a human camouflage, that you might say, which they definitely do in the cartoon one, but, you know, Jumba's just wearing a big Hawaiian shirt and sunglasses.
Yeah.
And I really wish they went through that in this trailer
that
as well.
Would have been really funny if they kept the original, just like minimal disguises, you know,
and everybody
wearing
buys
like
it.
a wig, and everybody just is like, oh, okay, whatever.
Yeah, that would be absolutely perfect. So I hope that was just like a little tidbit, and we actually do see some real live Jumba and Pleakley. But I'm super happy with the trailer so far. I think Stitch looks amazing. Obviously, the core of the relationship of the Ohana family is going to be core, which I feel like, you know, the three main characters, Lilo, Stitch, and Nani, I believe her name was. Yeah, just making that sort of core family. And I'm just, I even put on my threads, I was like, all right, damn it, I'm in. Which hasn't been the case in the past when I see Disney live action remakes like this. What do you think?
So I kind of have the same response that you did about these live action movies. I have nostalgia for the originals, which Lilo and Stitch is a great original, you know, Disney animation movie. I hear that we're getting these and I'm like, why? Why do we need them? Like, the original movie is perfect. And Lion King was the one example that really set me off, because I was like, Lion King is probably my favorite Disney movie of all time. Like, it's absolutely perfect.
It is a perfect
movie. We
movie.
don't need another one. Right. It's a perfect movie. We don't need another one. Why are we doing this? And the Lion King remake, which despite making, I don't know, there's something like $1.6 billion in theaters, but it just fell so flat.
Yeah.
The voice acting wasn't there.
I couldn't connect with it. It didn't really have the heart. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, the heart. Exactly. It didn't have the heart. And it's like hard because, like, those animated movies, and especially Lion King is like a prime example, because it's anthropomorphic animals. And in animation, you can make animals have facial expressions.
Yep.
In a live action show, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, it's an animal. Like, it can't really portray emotion. So it just wasn't, I just don't think it was destined to do well in the first place. I mean, well, depending on how your definition of well, I suppose, because again, box office, it did
financial success.
So, financial success. But I mean, I'm never watching that thing again unless my kids want to, you know, like, it's just fell completely flat to me, and I did not watch Mufasa because of that. So
I'm in the same boat.
I am not a fan of these live action reboots. And that's not to say that I don't watch them and enjoy them, because there are quite a few that have been solid. The Aladdin one was pretty decent. Beauty and the Beast, honestly, was pretty good. There's been a few that have been solid, but this is one that I'm just like, man, Lilo and Stitch, it's a great movie. I just don't know why we need another one. But I do echo exactly what you said. They're doing a great job with Stitch specifically. And if you can do a good job with Stitch, I think you can make a good movie. So we'll see how it goes. Getting Chris Sanders back to voice Stitch was absolutely essential. They did that. Yeah. And I think I still had reservations about it until I saw this trailer. That opening CGI scene of him in space, that looks great. And that's something that I was not really expecting, because, like, you know, it's a live action movie. Obviously there's going to be some CGI because of Stitch and some of the alien characters and stuff like that. But, like, it looks great. It looks beautiful. So, I mean, I'm a lot more excited than I was before I saw the trailer. I'll give it that.
Which I think is exactly what trailers should do. So,
exactly.
Yeah. Just quickly on Chris Sanders, that guy doesn't get enough props for his writing credits, because he wrote Lilo and Stitch, the original, but he also wrote How to Train Your Dragon and The Wild Robot. Like, a heartfelt animation story. The guy knows what he's doing. So Yeah, I just wanted to
That's
shout out
awesome.
Chris Sanders and his writing ability because, he doesn't get talked about enough in that space. I think he's awesome at storytelling in that
Absolutely. I had no idea that he was a writer, so
regard.
that's really cool. But yeah, I mean, it looks great. I'm excited for it. My kids will want to go, so I'll definitely go to see it in theaters. I'm still like cautiously optimistic, just because of the history that we have with live action.
Yeah.
It looks a lot better than I expected, though.
Yeah, that's the safest place to be in, I think, is cautiously optimistic. And, I hate to say it, but I'm kind of this way with Marvel too. I'll watch the ones I'm very interested in or that draw me, but then the ones that kind of, it's very much a book by its cover situation, which is sad, but
Sure.
that's just the way that it is because, you get burnt in the past and you're like, don't want to be hurt again. It's human nature.
Right. That's just how the entertainment industry is. It's like, I mean, and it has changed quite a bit in the past 10 to 15 years, probably, with reviewers becoming, so prevalent online. And like, we have an Infinity Bro, Max, who will go and watch reviews, listen to reviews, read reviews of a movie before he goes to see it, to see if he will even go to the movie. To the point of some movies, not all movies, not Marvel movies, but some movies, to the point of even spoiling the movie because he wants to go. He was like, is this a movie that's worth spending my money on?
Yep.
Exactly. I'm not to that level. I want to experience the movie, but at the same time, it has really changed the landscape of the entertainment industry and how movies are marketed. We're getting trailers that, this Lilo and Stitch trailer is 2.5 minutes long. Up until 5-10 years ago, trailers were like a minute and a half tops, like just very short, kind of like oh, hey, yeah, this is happening type of thing.
Yep.
Now they're putting so much in trailers because they want to draw you in to go spend money on this movie, even to the point of like almost revealing the whole movie in the trailer. Sometimes it's different. It's different now, but at the same time, for consumers, this is a good thing because, again, like you said, I watched this trailer and I'm like, hey, okay, like I'm not entirely convinced, but I'm not against it either. So I'm probably going to go spend money on this movie.
Yeah, that's exactly right as well. And I think in this day and age, with so much media coming out, and the economy as it is, you kind of can afford literally to be choosy because there is more things coming out to entertain you, to satiate you, but you also have to then, because if you're going to spend money on every single thing that you want that comes out like you used to in the 90s, you're going to go broke. But I think that it's definitely a good time to be a consumer, and for movie makers, they definitely have to develop something or find some way to entice. And with this, at least with Lilo and Stitch trailer, it got me. I'm a hook on I'm a fish on the hook. So whatever they did with that worked.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it got me.
So what would you rate your hype out of 6 for the Lilo and Stitch?
Out of 6, I'd probably give it a 4.5 because I'm still holding that reservation. But this has been the one that I'm most excited for in a very long time. I think the last time I felt this way about one was The Jungle Book.
Okay, and The Jungle Book was a solid one. That one,
yeah, that was a
not
solid
bad.
one. Yeah,
Right.
So I'm pretty excited. I'll definitely see it. So
yeah, I'm definitely right about that level as well. I'll give it a 4 just because I was probably a lot lower on it before this trailer, but it definitely has elevated my interest quite a bit. So there you go. That's Lilo and Stitch. If you guys want to let us know what you thought of the Lilo and Stitch trailer, tell us if you're going to go see it. Let us know on our social media, or you can email us at infinitybrospodcast@gmail.com. All right, we are going to dive into Invincible here. I'm not going to give a spoiler warning yet because what I want to do first is I want to get your background on Invincible, like what you thought of seasons 1 and 2. If you've read the comics at all, what do you think about Invincible? For those of you guys who maybe have not dove into it or watched the show, Invincible is a series on Amazon Prime that is based on quite a significant and long comic run of the same name. And the show is literally ripped straight from the pages of the comic book because of, I believe Robert Kirkman is the name of the writer. And he's basically...
He's the Image guy. He did the work Walking Dead as well. So
yeah, he's been like in on the series from the beginning as well. Like I don't think he is the sole writer because obviously it's like an adaptation going from comic book to a TV series, but he is very, very, very involved, and he's there guiding and directing all of this stuff that's going on with the series. So great adaptation, but what do you think of that all prior to season 3 coming out this year?
My journey with Invincible started when a friend of mine gifted me a trade paperback of the first volume. Read that, thought it was pretty good, and then years and years and years later they brought this out. So I had some familiarity with the character that drew me into the show initially. Watching season 1, completely blown away by it. Adult animation is a soft spot of mine, so watching this is really great. And it's also very refreshing to see something that's different from the superhero sort of media that we have experienced before. So season 1 I was impressed with. Season 2 I watched and I thought was even better than season 1. Really getting to connect with these new characters. I like the quirkiness of the superheroes, but also they're very powerful sort of superheroes, so they feel very volatile and very dangerous, which is some of the things I loved about the Invincible universe. And I was really, really encouraged and hyped to see season 3. So that was where I sort of came in. High expectations, very high enjoyment, and a little bit of comic background knowledge, but I haven't read any since. So I'm also viewing these seasons blind like everybody else.
So if you're a comic book fan at all, even if you haven't read these, you may have seen that the Invincible story comes out in these compendiums. And I believe there's like 6 of them, if I'm correct, but like they're
monstrous.
Things. Like they're giant, like huge comics, graphic novel lover's dream, like these giant paperback books of the Invincible story. And I'd read probably like half of the first compendium before the show dropped, so I was like familiar as well. But I think if I even remember correctly, honestly, that we're past the point that I had read to. So from this point on, like, I mean, even before this, I think even season 2, from that point on, it was like, I don't know anything about the story. So just taking me along for the ride here. I actually disagree with you though. Season 1 peak. It was fantastic, amazing. Season 2 it seemed to me like a building season, honestly. Like it was very universe filling and had a lot of character building, but it wasn't quite as exciting. It wasn't like, all of the fun stuff that we were getting in season 1 to me. So season 2, I wasn't quite as high on, but like, again, this is, like you said, this is top tier, like adult animation, very perfectly suited to people that love superhero stuff. Like Invincible's almost like it's not quite a satire, I would say, of the superhero genre, but Robert Kirkman like takes all the tropes of superheroes and just meshes them all together. And it's a great story too. Like it's not a joke. It's not like a big joke or anything like that, but he takes all of these tropes from superheroes and blends them into his story, and it's fantastic. So yeah, season 3 I was very excited for, and it definitely did not disappoint me. So from here on out, we're going to be spoiling season 3. So here is your official spoiler warning for season 3 of Invincible.
This is
Prepare yourself.
an Infinity Bros
Prepare yourself.
spoiler warning.
All right, so right off the bat, we get Mark coming back, and it starts pretty early, but he starts this relationship with Eve. So that was kind of a main theme throughout this whole season. I want to know what you think of their relationship, especially coming off of season 2, and I might even be mixing this up a little bit. Maybe a little bit of season 1 mixed in there with Amber. That relationship, to me, I'm glad it ended because it was not going well for either of them. And it was just kind of annoying to watch, honestly, that they were so bad at just being in a relationship, both of them. So we get Mark and Eve. What did you think of the development of their relationship and how they ended up at the end of season 3?
I think through season 1 and 2, there was always that chemistry between those two characters. So for me, it was definitely not a surprise. When, as you said, with Amber, Mark and Amber, I think their intentions were good and they definitely had some feelings for each other, but their lives were just so completely different. And Mark always had to hide that part of himself that was invincible until, like, she obviously knew about it in the end of their relationship, but then even then it wasn't compatible because they just lived in two different worlds. I liken it to Batman and Catwoman. Like, Batman would always find relationships as Bruce Wayne, but they would never really fit because there was a massive chunk of him and part of him that he had to keep hidden. And Catwoman, Selena Kyle, would always satiate that, and that's why they're kind of good together. In this regard, Eve and Mark, I think they're healthier than Batman and Catwoman for sure. And I think that it really helps us to see Mark's humanity and also Eve's humanity as well, because they are so supportive of one another's journey in that space. It's almost like a healthy representation of that kind of relationship there. And they started off as friends, which is good. It is, to me, the through line of season 3, because a lot of the episodes in season 3 were kind of episodic in terms of villain of the week, I guess you could liken it to. And the through line throughout was Mark building this found family almost now, because his initial family unit had been crushed after Nolan beat the absolute crap out of him.
Absolutely.
So now, it's his mum, it's Paul, it's Oliver, Eve, and Mark, and that found family relationship really is the crux of season 3 developing forward. And I think a lot of people are getting on the hype train about Mark and Eve and their relationship and how it's really developed and blossomed into a nice space. But I'd really like to mention the fact that it's that whole family unit that's really kind of starting to ground Mark a little bit more and present him as a really big difference towards what his father was and what he was. Because in the earlier episodes of season 3, you're kind of seeing some very big similarities between how Mark was and his ideals and his ways of thinking, especially towards Cecil, as Nolan did. So in my mind, I was kind of sitting there thinking, is he going to go down that path? Is this the story he's taking now that he kind of starts to learn to understand how his father was? And then, he goes down that track. But then, they kind of flipped it when he valued family more, which I definitely think is his mother's influence. And I think with Eve, it's definitely a really good representation of a connected kind of relationship with mutual goals and respecting of one another's autonomy. And I think it developed into a really nice space. And when season 3 left off, I think it's in a really nice space as well. I'm extremely glad that that's how it is represented, because in so many superhero movies, and it was prevalent in Mark and Amber's relationship as well, there was always just a tension. There was always that tension. And I think, as you said, it was annoying. And in previous, like Spider-Man comes to mind, the original Spider-Mans with Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, whenever that MJ and Peter were together, they were just not connecting. And that was a point of frustration for the audience. So I'm really glad to see in Invincible that it's a healthy connection for a change, which is good for our hero who gets beaten to crap and the world is against him. And he's got so much of this guilt on his plate that he can actually have a safe harbor where he can, be his vulnerable and emotional self with Eve, who is also able to do the same with him. So good space.
I definitely think that is a great way to say it. And just in general, in entertainment, it's nice to see a couple that are doing well for once, because you see so many shows and movies and stuff like that. And the point of the relationship is the drama in the relationship, right? Like that's what makes their relationship interesting, is the drama. Well, guess what? These guys don't really have drama right now. Like they're doing great. And it's kind of just refreshing to be like, oh yeah, all right, they're in a good relationship right now. That's nice to see.
Yeah. And I think for me, I've been conditioned by those kinds of shows because I've been waiting for the shoe to drop the whole time. I've been waiting for the thing to happen and that sucks because, you're always waiting for it to fail. But I hope it goes for as long as it possibly can. And I'd always, when I'd watch TV shows, whether it be animation or not, you'd see the episode count and you'd be like, okay, in the middle of, like, they've just got together at the start of the season, middle of the season, they'll be great. It's honeymoon phase. End of the season, they're going to start to hit a rough patch. So I'm like, episode 20, something's going to happen. Like, it's really refreshing and surprising as well. Like you said, with Kirkman sort of taking all the superhero tropes and then sort of flipping them or changing them or adapting them. That's why I think this show really resonates with people, because it's giving them something they don't expect, but it's also giving them something they're familiar and comfortable with. And I really hope the shoe doesn't drop, because I like this relationship.
That relationship kind of came to a head, I guess, when Mark is fighting Conquest in that final episode, which we'll talk about that in a bit. Like, fantastic fight, fantastic finale. When Conquest just decimated Eve, which you knew was coming. Like, and
she's a human, man.
Yeah, she's a human. And I knew, I haven't read this far in the comics, but like I've seen comic panels, and they did a great job of adapting almost straight panels from the comics to animation. And, you know, obviously this dude who is just destroying worlds is going to take her down at some point. Like, she's puffing hard after fighting him for a minute. And he's just like, okay, here we go. Takes her out. And then Mark is absolutely broken at that point. And that was kind of the point where I was like, okay, this is like real. This is cool that we're seeing Mark just absolutely in shambles. And we'd seen like pieces of it, you know, like when she was hurt before and he didn't want to leave her side and stuff like that. We saw like glimpses of that, but like, this is a broken man because he thought she was dead. And it was so cool to just see his response and just be like, you're not seeing tomorrow.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite lines of his in this whole series was, you know, I've seen the future and you don't see tomorrow. It's just like, oh yeah, here we go. Gonna get an epic fight after that.
I think, yeah, I completely agree, because that moment for Mark, beforehand, he'd always been so ashamed of his Viltrumite heritage because of the things that his father has done. And you always saw him being that little bit restrained. In this fight with Conquest, he completely unleashed, which also mirrors Conquest's joy in this fight. He was like, I really love letting loose right now, and this is a joy to me. And you also, like, Mark wasn't taking any joy in it, but it was the first time for me that I saw that he wasn't actually showing that restraint in an actual battle, because he had been so emotionally hurt by the fact that Eve had been killed. Yeah, and I think that he will now, moving into the future, almost see his Viltrumite heritage as a usefulness, like he can actually overcome these things, because like in the end line, the very last thing that he says, you know, if anyone hurts my family now, I'll have no problems with killing them, which is a little bit darker and a little bit more Viltrumite, but you see that he went there, you know, like he was capped at here, and his emotionality kind of tied him to a moral space where he wasn't killing anyone, but now he's like, okay, bad things happen when I let bad people go. So he knows that he has the capacity. That restraint is gone. That Viltrumite power within him can cause some serious damage, and he literally let loose. And I'm wondering what the negative sort of psychological impacts on that for him will be, because Mark is also a character through season 3 who harbored a lot of guilt for a lot of different reasons, whether it be founded or unfounded. So this moment for him to change, it's almost like, did something bad enough happen for him to be like, you know, stuff it. Right. Bad people are going now. Which begs the question as well, which is why I love this show. Psychologically, or even like morally, does Mark have the right to choose that, being as godly powerful as he is? Does he have the right to choose, this person's bad in my eyes, he deserves to die, or she deserves to die. This person does not, so they deserve to go to jail. That's an interesting kind of thing to watch with somebody so powerful.
Yeah, actually, that's a great thing to bring up, because this is kind of what I mentioned about like these tropes. Like we get this like superhero trope of like, the one I think of the most is Batman and the Joker. So the Joker's just literally crazy dude who just murders people on a whim. And the Batman refuses to kill him because he's got this like moral code, right? Like, I'm not going to kill him. We're just going to like, you know, put him in Arkham, breaks out, and the cycle goes over and over and over again.
Goes on, yeah.
And the question is, if Batman kills Joker, is that going to prevent lives, you know, from being taken? Is he doing the right thing in that sense? That's the question. And we're bringing that into the show and kind of weaving it into all of these tropes that we're wrapping together in the show. And I love that they kind of play with that a little bit, because you're right. I mean, what is the psychological, you know, consequences of deciding that? Obviously, a lot of the people that he will probably decide that about are people that he sees doing bad things, like with his own eyes. Yeah. So that's like, you know, he probably does have the moral, I don't know if justice is the right word or whatever, but like he sees somebody murder a bunch of people in front of him. Yeah, obviously that person, or like Angstrom Levy is a perfect example of that. Like, yeah, he watched him do some terrible things, and then he brought all of the Invincibles here and they murdered a bunch of people. Mark watched that with his own eyes. And, he did have a chance to end Angstrom Levy, but, and that scene where Oliver is like, dude, do it. What are you waiting for? Like, kill him. He's going to kill more people. And that's going to happen. Why are you waiting for it? And that's kind of where Mark, I think, starts thinking about that. And then you obviously mentioned the scene at the very end where he's like, if anybody messes with my family now, I'm going to kill him. Like, I will have no hesitation anymore. But he hesitates in that moment because he still hasn't made up in his mind if he has that right.
Yep.
And Angstrom Levy is still alive and probably going to do a lot more bad things and kill a lot more bad people, or kill a lot more people. So we'll see how that all plays out. But we already kind of dove into a little bit, but let's just go ahead and talk about that Conquest fight, because wow, that is one of the best fights we've had in not only just in Invincible, but like in animation, in superhero animation ever. That episode right now, all of the episodes are very highly rated on IMDb, but that episode, the finale, is rated a 9.9 out of 10 on IMDb with 52,000 ratings. That's insane. Like, most of the ratings of the numbers in the season are at like around 10,000. That one has 52,000 and it's a 9.9. That is like universally loved, except for IGN, who gave it a 4 out of 10. That's IGN.
Clickbait, I think
it's all clickbait for them. But man, what a fight. Conquest was a absolutely just evil villain. Like, you think evil. This dude is killing people for fun. Just absolutely insane. And Mark finally, like you says, is able to like lift the restraint, whatever restraint he has, to fight him and ultimately defeat him. But wow, what a fight.
I 100% agree. I think the animation stood up in this level. Just the different kinds of action shots that you got from the different kinds of perspectives, the way that they would smash through buildings, which is a point in itself that we might get to later. But just, the absolute brutality of the fight and the hard-hitting punches was nothing like anything we'd seen when he'd fought Viltrumites before. So you knew that Conquest was kind of a different bag. And to be voiced by Jeffrey Dean Morgan as well, just that remake from Kirkman's Walking Dead with Glenn and Negan, obviously, and he just does an absolute stellar job performing that role as well. And I especially like that. I don't know how many minutes Conquest was on screen for, but in that time, it was a complete fight and an action sequence. But through that, we still got a bit of character development through Conquest as well. Like, you could see and hear him talking about all the different things that he's kind of gone through. And I loved that scene where he goes down and whispers to a broken Mark that, I am lonely.
So lonely. Yeah.
That speech, because, he gets sent in to do all the things that all the Viltrumites don't want to do. And he's so brutal in his approach, and he's so sadistic and unhinged in that way that nobody wants to be around him. And that actually bothers him. And then that line as well at the end, he's just like, take that to your grave. So it's like, I'm going to let out this emotional pit. And I wonder how many times he's done that. Honestly, like, how many times has he just emotionally splurged to a victim that he's just about to pummel? So it's almost like his release, and maybe that's why he enjoys it so much, or he enjoyed it so much as a character. Like, he gets that release and that catharsis that he's like, I can reveal this to the people and it's never going to go anywhere. And then
probably not very much, honestly, because I don't think anybody can really take the level of beating that Mark takes in that scene, like in the whole universe, because he just goes in
paper bags, just going through people.
Right, exactly. Oh my gosh. We get in that fight scene. I almost thought they were going to reference a little bit, but like, it's clear reference to season 1 where Omni-Man does that to Mark, where he is holding his head, and then the train, he just holds his head there while the train just obliterates around him and kills, hundreds of people with the train. Conquest does this through a city. And thousands, tens of thousands, maybe, of people. Just absolutely insane, the level of brutality that fight. And they level at least 3 major cities in that fight, right?
Absolutely,
like, at least 3. Just absolutely insane. But Conquest is technically still alive. Cecil, at the end of the episode, we find, has encased him in a what looks
tungsten
to be a large
400-pound block. Yeah,
right. And he mentions a comment like if he so much as twitches, he'll blow up. So he wants to get information out of this guy. And I'm like, my first thought was like, that's the wrong Viltrumite to get information out of, dude. Like, I don't know what you are thinking, but this dude is absolutely going to find a way out of that. And he is going to do the same exact thing that he just did in this episode. I cannot believe that Cecil thinks that's a good idea.
Oh, I'm a Cecil backer. I like the things that he's doing in terms of making the superhero like team, the Guardians, and sort of fighting for humanity's sake. He's got a very realist approach, I guess you could say. But this is probably one of the dumbest decisions that I've ever seen that man do in 3 seasons of television. Because sometimes you just got to let the big fish go, my friend. Sometimes you just got to let it swim down the river and get decimated and burnt alive. He pissed off Mark for one, which is he knows how powerful Mark can be now, and now he's holding the most powerful Viltrumite that's ever come and invaded Earth in just a 400 block of tungsten. Like he crashed through 1,000,001 buildings. A big explosion probably won't put a scratch on his head. Yes, I don't know what Cecil's doing here, and I know that it's like a plot tension thing. Like you always kind of know that he's down there and he's going to come back.
Sure.
Which as a fan, I'm like, heck yeah, that is going to be awesome. But for Cecil and his pattern, it fits because this is what he's always done. But I think his learning journey now has to be he needs to find when to let it go, because he's kind of like Iron Man in the last few Avengers movies, where he's like, I'm putting a shield of armor around the world. And that's kind of what Cecil's trying to do. But at what point do you go, okay, the things I'm using to protect this world are actually hurting it more?
Right.
Yeah. So I hope to see that in the future for Cecil, because I looked at it and I was like, man, out of all these awesome emotional moments that are happening in the close of this episode, that is like a big spike in heart rate level. It's like, burn him.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One thing more that I want to touch on before we kind of start to wrap things up here is, so we get this giant fight between Conquest and Invincible. I mean, we mentioned like at least 3 major cities are decimated. Hundreds of thousands of people are probably killed. We get a little bit of a subplot during the season that kind of addresses this. We get Powerplex, a villain that is, what's his name again? I'm trying to think of his
Aaron Paul.
Aaron Paul, yeah, from Breaking Bad. Voices him, and he it's kind of hilarious, but he kind of plays the same character in this that he did in Breaking Bad. This guy who unfortunately is just a pawn in the grand scheme of things. And he at some point during the season tries to, fight Invincible, doesn't turn out for him, accidentally kills his wife and child. And man, there's a lot to say about this whole concept of like superheroes battling supervillains, accidentally doing tons of damage and tons of murder. Who is held responsible for this? Or should they be held responsible? Obviously, the supervillain is responsible, but does the superhero hold any of the responsibility or blame in Powerplex's case for all of the damage that they have caused?
I think that's a very poignant question, and we were talking superhero tropes. It's probably one that comes up a little bit because that like even in the Marvel universe with the New York attack, we saw in Spider-Man: Homecoming, the Vulture is obviously a victim of that kind of, and that's the first time we kind of see that. And I liked that we saw that perspective in the Invincible universe that just sort of goes through and talks about the absolute destruction that occurs and then who is responsible for that. And I think Mark puts a lot of the blame on himself. As I said before, blame's a big, big theme through this whole thing. And he puts a lot of blame on himself because I think he mirrors that, because he can draw the connections to self and say, this is my responsibility in it, and this is how I could have done it differently. But, if he's not going up and stopping these things, what's the alternative? So I guess you kind of have to look at it in that way. But also, if you look in ground level at Powerplex, oh man, I've seen a lot of people calling him online like a tragic villain. And for me, I love Aaron Paul, but I could not get behind that dude, man. Like, I can see that he'd lost so much in terms of his sister and I believe his nephew or his niece, I think it was.
Yep.
Like, he'd lost so much, and he had that trauma and that tragedy, and he pitted the blame on Invincible and Omni-Man in that moment. But man, if there is any reason to turn around and turn your trauma into like a life, like he had a wife and kid that he could just like build himself and develop himself for, but he brought them into the fold and just poisoned them with whatever he had sort of going on in that moment. And oh man,
yeah, I mean, talk about losing sight of the big picture. Like that's
Yes.
exactly what happens to this guy. Like he wants to fight Invincible so bad that he puts his wife and child at risk and ultimately kills them just in order to get a chance at him. And he doesn't even, he makes several comments throughout that obviously he's trying to make Invincible pay, but like he doesn't even know if his power level is enough to make Invincible hurt or pay or whatever he's thinking. You know, it's crazy the amount of risk that he's taking with his life and his family and stuff like that. But yeah, you're totally right. Like I do understand where he's coming from, but at the same time, to go that far is just like tragic, as you said. I mean, that tragic side of things, that's a sad story. But I do appreciate that they address that side of things, because in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's pretty much just ignored. Like, obviously, we do have the division that cleans up after the superheroes, which I would love if they dove into a little bit more. And then, you know, like the origins of the Vulture in Homecoming and stuff like that. But like, I love that in Invincible, Mark mentions many, many times that he's like going to help clean up. Yeah, guess what? Like, you guys made this mess. Like, you should be helping to clean up, especially since you have so many powers that would be helpful in that, right? And then Eve also going to college, so basically she can learn architecture better and learn to build things better, so she can, you know, help clean up or even help build, you know, a better world is kind of what her whole deal is. But still, like, I like that they kind of dive a little deeper than the typical superhero story and world, and they go into that side of things a little bit, because Paul actually mentions at one time too, they're having a conversation at the dinner table, and he says something about, I don't know if it's his real estate or whatever, or something like that. And then later he's like, that was stupid. Like, what?
Yeah.
Why do they care about real estate?
They're doing cosmic stuff.
Yeah. And then Deb reminds him, she's like, yeah, like these guys need to know about like everyday people stuff too. Cause like, obviously they're living in this world, and that's who they're protecting. Like, they need to know about this stuff too. So don't be, you know, afraid to like talk about your day, talk about, you know, small stuff or whatever. So I love that they dive into that side of things as well in this show.
Yeah, I like that too. And I think that's really important for Mark especially to learn and know about and have gravity towards, because he's not a parent to Oliver, but he's essentially co-raising Oliver, because he's like his idol. He's modeling the behaviors that he kind of wants Oliver to follow. And that's another really interesting and awesome part of this season, is there's that dynamic where Invincible Mark is in the position that Nolan Omni-Man was in season 1. He's sort of the model for the boy that's sort of up and coming, who glamorizes the hero. And, you know, Oliver brings up some very good points in terms of killing the bad guys so they don't go on and hurt in the future. And Mark think that's a very sort of dangerous opinion at the start, because he has this trauma and this fear of himself, but also Oliver turning into how Nolan was. Like, that is a big trauma and a fear that he's also like projecting onto his ward, that he really kind of needs to work with and work towards, because every action that he does obviously impacts Oliver, to the point where in the Conquest fight, Conquest knew and knows how important Oliver was to Mark, and we get that oh man, that scene where he's got him above his head, absolutely brutal. And you know, for a show like this to go there, you're like, they're pulling on all of the sort of emotionalities and aspects of Mark to get this, pretty much demonizing the character of Conquest, because irredeemable after that, really. But yeah, it just kind of lays gravity to the point that we were talking about before, how Oliver even though he's speaking from the mind of a child where he's saying, these guys are bad, we need to kill them so they don't do anything else. Like, Mark comes to that realization at the end, but I think he had a lot of reservations before and a lot of restraint, like we were saying, because of his fear about what had happened to him in season 1 at the hands of his father, Nolan, and knowing that there's Viltrumite blood through his family and there's that tendency to outburst in violence. It's a very dangerous space. So I like that development for Mark being the mentor for Oliver through this season 2. And yeah, I think that is what I took out most from this, is that he's developed in that manner in terms of like a leader not only to the world and the Guardians, but also to a small found family unit, which was really good to see grow.
Yeah, definitely a lot of amazing themes in this series and this season itself, and looking forward to more. So unfortunately, we're running out of time, but before we get to our outro, what is your rating of season 3 of Invincible?
I think out of 6, it's out of 6, correct? For the
Yep, out of 6.
Infinity Bros podcast. Yep, I'll be rating this a 5. I think absolutely amazing third season. I think it is just building and building from here. For me, some of the points as to why it wasn't a 6 was obviously that I don't know if it was intentional or not, but the Powerplex villain kind of really irked me, and I think that like that was probably intentional, but for me, there's that regard. But then also the city destruction and things like that. It's really great to watch and see, but as characters, like take yourself off to like Goku did it in Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, for real.
Like, let's go somewhere where nobody will get hurt. Like, that's as quickly as it can be.
Yeah.
But I think, voice acting wise, the stars that they got on this, absolutely perfect. 5 stars out of 6 for me.
I would rate it a 5.5 out of 6. I don't think it quite reaches that peak superhero animation like it did in season 1 for me. Season 1's a 6 out of 6. I love season 1, but it's still really good and a return to form a little bit because, like I said, in my opinion, season 2 is kind of a building season, and we get to see some of the fruits of season 2 in season 3. So I absolutely loved it. It was a great season, and I'm looking forward to more. And I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think Robert Kirkman at some point has said that there's enough material for like 9 or 10 seasons of Invincible. So like, I mean, we've got plenty of show left. We got a lot of leg left in this show, and I absolutely looking forward to that. I don't think it's going to get old. Not yet, anyways.
I don't think so either. They've got too much. And, if they do get old with this one, they can spin off with, the Alan the Alien Chronicles, because I'd watch the heck out of that too.
Oh my gosh, I would too.
Yeah, what a great buddy cop.
We didn't even get to that point, but yeah, running out of time, unfortunately. So, all right. Well, Aaron, thank you so much for joining me and chatting nerd news and Invincible with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's awesome to be a part of the Infinity Bros podcast. Yeah, I love what you're doing, Isaac. Keep up the social media stuff too. I love seeing you.
Thanks, man.
Movie quotes.
Tell us where exactly we can find you on the internet. So, and we'll have all these in the show notes, but let us know where we can catch up with the Fandom Portals.
So yeah, Aaron at the Fandom, or me, Aaron at the Fandom Portals. You can find me at Fandom Portals on Instagram and on Threads. We're probably most active on those two social medias. We've just sort of started a Reddit, but I'm very much investigating that space. I'm a newbie in the Reddit space. If you wanted to be involved in picking out the movies that we use on our podcast, you can follow me on Letterboxd, which is Fandom Portals at the Letterboxd as well. And we're looking to start a website soon, so keep your eyes and internet fingers out for that in the future. But yeah, we're definitely available on the social medias, and our podcast is on Apple and Spotify and literally all the places that you can find a podcast, and it is just the Fandom Portals Podcast.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. And thank you, listeners, wherever you're listening, however you're listening. Thank you so much for making us a part of your podcast experience. We love you 3000. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Infinity Bros podcast. You can find the Infinity Bros on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Twitch, and YouTube at the Infinity Bros. You can also check out our website at theinfinitybros.com for links, reviews, and sweet merch. Feel free to send listener feedback via social media or email at infinitybrospodcast@gmail.com.